Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first Learning Lychee episode. And this is a new series that I'm going to do. It's kind of replacing the fully supported series and some of the other stuff that I've launched because I'm going to make this a more complete series where every month I do a new episode where essentially I'm going to go into detail on at least one or more aspects of Lychee Slicer. Today, we're going to talk about the software itself a little bit, and then we're going to dig into how to create supports, how to create rafts, when or not to hollow an object, essentially based on orientation or shape, and also kind of going over supporting some, I don't want to say really difficult or challenging objects, but objects that kind of require a little bit more finesse because they've got some weird overhangs or just things that are going to be really annoying islands. Anyway, without causing too much of a leeway into this one, let's cut right into it. Okay, here we are in Lychee Slicer 7.0.1, and in case you don't have the newest version, go ahead and download the newest edition on the Lychee Mango website. You'll see up here in the upper right hand corner, right under the close button, you'll see the 7.0.1. Now, you guys will notice I've started doing my screen capture, and I'm actually capturing the entire screen instead of just capturing Lychee itself. The reason for that is because it'll actually allow me to capture my mouse, which will give you a little bit more in depth as to what I'm clicking on. Because I know sometimes it can be a little you don't see some of the things that go on when I do it the other way. So anyway, we're trying it this way. Hopefully, this works better. Um, so as you will see here, the slicer is going to be empty when you load it up. You have some like rudimentary objects here. You can load a square, a cube if you want, and things like that. But anyway, when you first load in, you're not even going to have a printer loaded. But if you want to learn a bit more about that, if you want to get more into the basics of Lychee, we actually have two videos that we published last month, which were Lychee basics. And essentially, that teaches you kind of from the ground up how to add a printer, how to set up your resins, how to go layer by layer, doing your different islands, stuff like that. Those videos are definitely a must before you kind of come to this video. So I'm going to put the links to those down in the description, so you can go and check those out. It'll be a little bit easier to find than having to navigate back to my videos and searching for them. So that should give you a little bit of a step up. And then when you come back to this video, you're definitely going to know a lot more, um, you know, and you're going to be able to, I think, tackle that a lot better. Anyway, let's go ahead and load an object in here, and we'll go over a couple of things. Now, first of all, whenever you load objects, especially non-supported objects, they're usually going to come in whatever default orientation the modeler put them in when they were done. In this particular case, uh, we're looking at essentially it's laying on its back and it's kind of sticking off the build plate in two places, so this isn't going to work anyway. Now, there's a few ways we could orient this head that would make some sense. Because it's got a lot of wavy hair that sort of come down to the bottom, I almost am tempted to tilt it further this way and then backwards so the face doesn't get any damage. But I don't really want to lay it on its side like that because then this horn is going to take a lot of pressure and damage while it's being printed. So instead, I'm going to kind of let it build its way up from its hair, and then I'm just going to make sure I tilt the face back up towards the it's going to be the last thing that gets printed, essentially the bottom, so that way it doesn't take any support damage at all. And I'll just rely on these strands of hair here to kind of hold up the head for a little bit, and then eventually this big chunk of hair is going to be responsible, and then this neck post right here with the key is going to hold up the rest of it. And I'll explain how all that works as we kind of get into it. But the most important starting aspect is making sure orientation is where you want it to be. So make sure that you have your orientation set up. And if you want to be sure that it's within the boundaries, you can move the camera around by holding down your right mouse button. Mouse button. Wow, I can't spit that out today. And you can rotate the camera, giving yourself a bird's eye view. You can also use the angle cube over here to change your perspective, and then it'll just kind of click to a different camera. So this gives us an idea. Okay, yeah, we're well within the build plate, so we're fine there. Now, the next thing we really want to do after this is we want to make sure that we put a raft. And a lot of people are like, what the heck is a raft? Well, in resin printing, you want to make sure that you use a raft because rafts will save your prints as they will give it more support on the bottom. So for this one, I like to use shape raft, and that literally gives the shape of it onto the build plate. And I'm not going to hollow this because it's a really weird orientation, and I don't want to have to put holes in her hair. And I don't want to have to block all this hair because it'll get just as heavy as if I don't, because then I'll only be able to hollow this and her horns. And since I've already printed this part, I know it can be done solid, so it's not a big deal. It looks long and it looks tall, but honestly, it's not that heavy and it's not that big of a deal once you get the part out. But it's really where to start. And the reason I'm starting here is because this arch, this curve here, is going to be a great place for me to start building supports. Now, in most cases, the way I'll start is I'll usually go over to my support tab here, which is under prepare. So if you're new, we went from layout to prepare to support. Now, if you're curious about some other things like my support settings and stuff like that, I can post a link to my support settings, which will give you all 6 of my sets and subsets, as well as a couple additional support settings that I have saved in my menu. So, if that's something you are interested in, I have given that information out to other folks in the past. So, if you guys want my support size and stuff like that, just let me know. Post a comment and I will post a link. I have it uploaded on Google Drive somewhere for all to see and share. And y'all are welcome to have it. So essentially, once you get your raft set and you've decided what size support you're going to use, which we haven't decided yet, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a simple auto support setup and let the software build the preliminary supports around the object. Now, for this particular head, I started with a 0.22 tip diameter, a 2.22 tip length, and a 1.10 diameter for the actual support bar itself. So let's go ahead and start our supports there. We're going to click the object, make sure it's set to normal. Do not auto brace or auto parent. Yes, you can set the auto lift, but mine is already lifted because my Lychee Slicer is already set to lift on import. So then we go ahead and click on Generate Automatic Supports. And that's going to give us a basic layout. Now, that's a lot of supports. Now, that's because I actually forgot a step, and this is great. I'm glad I did this. So Lychee recently added a function to the software called Structure, which enhanced the bracing system that is part of the software currently. So in what I want to do is I'm going to replace this because this is the old method, and I will definitely say that Lychee Slicer, it just kind of it was a little bit messy. So I don't love the old auto supporting. So let me go ahead and we're going to do away with this. Click a little trash can up in the corner. Then I'm going to go over here to structure, and I'm going to turn the grid on. And then you'll notice with the grid turned on, well, there are no supports now, but you're going to see how this is going to create the supports differently. So let me go ahead and do the auto supporting again. And now check out how this does it. And you're going to see how clean of a support structure we're going to have by the time this is all done. Now what this does is it kind of does a lot of auto control where you've got multiple tips controlled by one bar. And this is smart because that's a bit of a string. See, again, it's not perfect, but this is what I'm going to teach you. If you ever see weird supports stringing off like that, definitely delete them. They don't need to be there. And for the most part, that actually did a pretty good job of covering most of the areas. So now the next thing we want to do is we want to go through and check for islands. Now, one of the things that Lychee Slicer does really well is island checking, and I rely on it pretty heavily to check my islands. But there's a trick that I use for this. And my Lychee Basics videos, I go through it in a little bit more detail. So I'm going to edit through the time that it takes to do the island searching, because it can take a while to complete each search. And then we're going to cut back once I'm done doing the island searching, and I'll explain how that actually works. All right, so what we're looking at here is the first island search. And again, if you watch the basics Lychee episode, you know that the way I do it is I go through different layer heights and I will specify that. Each one I change, and then that will, then I can do another island search, which will then give me another set of islands for me to look at and then catch, essentially preventing myself from having a failure. Now, the way Lychee displays these islands is by little red dots. And essentially, everywhere you see a little red dot, you're going to want to put a support, however best you can place it. Yeah, sometimes the areas might be crowded. Sometimes you can use mini supports. Sometimes you can use trees. It really depends. You can also push this little button here, and Lychee will do its best to support most of those red dots for you. I do, however, recommend that you check every single island yourself the first few times you do this to make sure you understand exactly how an island looks and how you should support it. The other important thing to note, and as you'll see, I'm adding supports here along the bottom of this hair, is that you really need to support the perimeter of an object very well in order for the most of it to print out properly. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't mean you have to support any of the middle, but the perimeter is actually the most important. Take, for example, this part of her neck. If I were to go around the entire neckband here and carefully place supports along each spot along this collar to make sure that we had a nice even support ring here. I know I'm not being that careful here, but put a nice little ring around the collar. And now I know that that perimeter is going to be well supported. And we can even take a look at that and see what that looks like. And that will support that neck really well. Now the rest of this is really just going to be a matter of filling in for the rest of the islands and then adding in our bracing system. Now, as I've said, I've printed this part before, so I'm going to cut out most of the island searching time, which takes a lot of effort and time. And then we're going to go ahead and look at the finished island catches in just a few minutes. I'll be right back. Okay, all the islands are done, and essentially the model is supported. Now, I have gone through this and validated it. Now, for those of you who don't understand what I'm saying, because I think I've mentioned validation twice, I'm going to turn my contact view on and just the line so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so validation is as we go through the print, you're going to want to take your, what we call the layer preview slider over here, and you're going to want to drag it up until you start to see the model form. Okay, so here, for example, that's our starting point. So validation, and I haven't done this yet, so I am going to catch some spots, means you're going to go through the model from layer 1 all the way up to it starts, to the layer it starts printing at, which in this case is about 101. Yeah, that's the very first spot. This is caught here, but this support kind of missed its mark. And I placed that manually, so that's my bad. So I'm going to put another support here on the end, so this is supported on both sides like that. And then I'm going to add one more right there in the middle. So now when this little piece forms, it's going to have 3 supports on it. Now as it gets bigger, it doesn't have a whole lot of additional support to it. This is going to get heavier, and it's going to pull. It's also going to be a little floppy and kind of like not that stiff. So I'm going to add a few more supports around here to ensure its survival. I'm also going to do that here along this edge. And you'll notice that white line that kind of follows your mouse. I want you to pay really close attention to that. That is your slice line. You can technically use that as a guide to place supports. A lot of cases I will actually use its direct curves to kind of create my support curves. This usually leads to the supports being very well distributed, and it leads to the part being very well supported with very little damage, and that's because of my choice of support tips. Because I know a lot of you are probably going, man, that seems like a lot of supports. Well, it's a decent amount, but this is going to be a decently heavy object. Well, not heavy, but it's going to pull a little tougher than a miniature would because it's got a nice amount of weight to it. So let's take a look at that. And again, we're clustering these together. These are small tips. That should be just fine to remove. We should be able to pop that right off. So as you go up through the model, you're going to find spots like that need extra attention. So for example, let's take a look at this other part of the hair. And I'm actually going to go down to my 0.20 to do some of these because they're a little bit smaller. And again, we're going to try and just do the perimeter, following the line as we kind of go up here. And this isn't as precise as I'm making it sound. You really can kind of be a little bit carefree with where you're putting them. The most important part here is going to be following, like you see this is an island. But this is an island that's supported by one support. So we're going to put another one there. And then we're going to follow this arch up the hair. Now, when I say be carefree, you can kind of be a little creative with your support structure, meaning like you can place them where you want them, but make sure that you're supporting them in an intelligent way. Don't just place them anywhere because they look cool. Place them because you know that it's going to need that support there. Like this, for example, is going to need extra support while it's building before it connects to this hair up here, as will this right here before it connects to this piece up here, which will eventually happen, but it takes a while. So that's going to be a few, at least 100 or so or more layers that it's going to be completely on its own, meaning it's only going to rely on the supports that you first spawned at the bottom. And if I left this the way that the auto support did it, it would have had one or two at the bottom and then a couple on the way up. No way it would have survived that way. So that's why you have to validate if you're going to use the method that I'm giving you, essentially. You have to go up through the model like this, and as you go through each part, you're going to find parts that need a little bit extra attention, like here. Now, this part might not, because I think I already touched on this. Yeah, see, I already went down these rows and used the supports there where they're needed. Now, again, I'm using a pretty light tip, 0.20 and a 0.22. Not going to cause too much trouble. Not going to be real hard to remove. Not going to cause you too much detail loss if it does touch the hair. Okay? So there's your key. There's the corner of the key as it starts to build in midair. Because this whole head orientation is kind of awkward. And then this is all going to connect. And we have this collar piece here. And I'm going to add a few more supports right here on the ring of that collar where the island starts. Oh, that's actually more hair. I'm sorry. That's not the collar. So that's more hair there. But we're going to, again, we want to add supports where necessary and try to think of the perimeter. Now, for those of you that are super new and don't know what the yellow checkerboard stuff is, that essentially is Lychee telling you this is a good place for a support. It's something that is at a high degree of pull because of the angle that it's at. So you need to make sure and place supports there. Those are really the spots you want to focus on while following the line of slice, because that's going to be your guide as to where the slices are going to happen. So if you want to secure the print as it's slicing, the best way to do that is to follow the slice line and use that as a guide. And again, the slice line is that white line that follows my mouse. See, as I'm moving the support there, you'll notice that the slice line will move. And you can use this as kind of like a curve to place supports along that slice line. And this will kind of help you determine where you need to put the most support versus the least amount of support, etc. And yes, I know it looks very crowded, but again, it's all about the tips. It's all about what tip you use, what support type you're using, how you're making them, connect. I have zero penetration on them, so they're not really going into the model very much. And again, they're very small. My practice with these kind of supports is they usually just pull right off. I don't ever need to get the clippers out. Now this hair is not a big old island, but we're going to go support that a little bit out there anyway. And we have more hair or some, oh no, this is part of a horn. Okay, so this is one of the horns now that's forming. Go ahead, Place some supports around the cylinder and down the middle of the horn, as well as a couple of light supports around the edge of that horn. Got this little dot here. It's like a decoration of sorts. And I believe we need to check her ear. Yeah. And you'll see that there's just some weird, you're always going to find these weird, awkward spots. They're going to start in midair. Like this piece here. It's just part of her horn. Pull that up. There we go. There's another one. See, and this is, again, why validation is very important. Some people use UV tools to do this and actually validate their layers. I prefer to do it this way and work in the actual application. Since Lychee has a really good island checker, it just works out pretty well. I don't really ever have to use any other tools. And you can ask my customers; they like my prints, so I think I got some pretty high quality stuff out there. All right, so we're gonna just keep building this up, and we got this little dot here. That, I don't know if this is actually on its own, although I don't think it is. This piece will need a little bit extra love because it's just kind of hanging out. You've also got this here. See, each one of these is a little island. That's an island. That's an island. That is not. This part would be a soft spot as well, where the horn is going to join to the head. So very important to make sure you get that nice and even there. If you notice some of the supports will turn red, that means they're in what's called proximity error. And I will explain that for you. And we also have to do a proximity check, so you'll get to see what I mean. We put little supports under the chin. The hair, everything seems good. I think I'm just going to finish scrolling up and make sure I don't have any more hanging parts. I might put a support under those horns. Okay, that looks good. So overall, supporting this, probably including island checking, I would take you probably about 30 to 40 minutes at most. That's using auto support as an assist and then kind of working your way from that. Now, if you don't want to use auto support at all and you just kind of want to go layer by layer and do your own thing, you can do that. Best way to do that would be start with your island searches and to kind of go build from there. I'm going to do an episode in a couple of weeks where we kind of go over different methods. And eventually I'm going to go through everything from supporting an arm to a leg to a torso to a lower, body, everything, weapons, you name it. We're gonna go over every single thing that you could possibly want to support for figurines, whether they're big or small. So anyway, now that we've got that done, we're gonna go ahead and do a couple last things. Not one last thing. We're gonna check proximity. So if you're still in your support tab, which you should be, you're gonna go over here to proximity, and real time should be on, which does catch some things, but it's not perfect. So I'll go ahead and run proximity. So we have one support. So I'll show you what I mean by proximity error. There it is. So let me go support proximity. This is that bug that I like to talk about. So this is a bug they haven't fixed. Essentially, it can't show me because I've probably got too much going on or I've reached some sort of memory restriction. No idea. No one can tell me why this does it, but it just doesn't work. Anyway, there's the support that's the problem. So we'll go ahead and we'll go into advanced mode by pressing the space bar. Select the middle part of the support and pull it away from the bit that it's too close to until the red turns into that nice orange color. And now we should be good. I will run that proximity check again. And we are good, golden. So now that that's done, I'm going to go back to my structure tab, and I'm going to choose a type of bracing that we're going to apply because we haven't done that yet. So I have a couple different presets that I personally use, and I can show you, the ones that I use personally. I have mini bracings, a couple different types. I have, also additional mini bracings, more mini bracings. And then I have this one, which I call mine. This is a custom one I use for about 90% of the stuff that I print, and it works really well. Because the supports, they have almost a flexibility to them, which means they won't be so rigid that they'll snap, but they also will be strong enough that they create a nice um, support structure for the piece. So the settings I'm using are these here. If you want to go ahead and write that down or whatever. I don't. I think I can export these settings, but I'll have to look into that. So I'm not going to change them, but these are the settings that I use. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save and Apply because I want to use them. And there we have our support structure. Now this looks heavy, but when this piece comes out, I'm literally going to be able to take those supports, squeeze them, and pop the head off. It's going to come off that easily. And I'm that confident in it because I've literally done this kind of printing with this kind of support work so many times. If you want good results, this is a good method that's going to get you a good print, at least if you're using Lychee Slicer. Now, once you've got it to this point and everything else is good, you did your proximity, you did your islands, you validated your print, last thing you have to do is slice it. So the next thing you want to do is go over to your export tab. And there's a couple different options we have here, including anti-aliasing and stuff like that. And I'll briefly go over anti-aliasing, but I have maybe probably done 10 episodes on aliasing over the years. Please go watch one of those. They definitely will go into it way more detail than I'm about to now. So by default, you have no aliasing. It's turned off. You have an option of using normal or fast slicing. I don't care personally what you use. I use normal slicing because this is glitchy and I don't trust it quite yet. It's a newer feature. I recommend saving that for a couple more versions. So we're going to just do normal for now. On the export tab, you can also look at a couple things like the slice, which will show you like the slice lines as you kind of go up and down. This is very similar to what you'd be looking at in UV tools, at least the black and white part. Picture mode, which will just show you, again, kind of similar to UV tools, where you're just looking at the actual slice bits. Then you have the simulator, which is fun, which will show you the print coming out of the printer. I mean, it's not really the printer, but it's, this is variably what it would look like while it's printing. And then you have the scale. So you can kind of see, okay, how big is this going to be? There's your can of soda, there's your head. And as you guys saw in the thumbnail for the video that you clicked on to get here, her head was decently large. And yeah, she's a pretty neat character. She was one of the new characters from September from the Digital Art Pinup catalogs, in case anyone is a fan. So when you're done oogling all the different export options, we can go back to Object. And then we're going to go over to the aliasing. Like I said, it's off to start with. So you're probably wondering what aliasing is. If you've ever worked with graphic design, you probably have an idea what anti-aliasing means. Essentially, it's a way to smooth out the edges of rough pixels. Since printers use pixels to cure your resin, they're trying to alias them to give you the smoothest curve possible, like a face, something round like a cylinder, anything like that. So this smoothing process is called anti-aliasing. There's a couple different types of it. You have smooth surfaces, sharpened details, contrast, blur. Smooth surfaces is my preferred. The radius is talking about how deep the radius of the actual blur is, and the gray offset is the amount of gray that's being used in the curve of the radius. Sharpened details has levels that go from 2, I think, to 16, I think, on some printers. And the gray offset is similar, whereas in it is the amount of gray that's being used. Contrast blur works very similar to smooth, but I don't use it because it doesn't tend to work with my printer types. It also uses a curve, and the gray radius refers to the amount of gray that is being used in the curve, essentially, as like a shade. Of course, there's a transparency to this, so I mean, it's not going to be a perfect thing. Contrast blur is supposed to get you a slightly better curve on something round like a ball, whereas sharpened details will work really nicely on tiny miniatures as long as you're printing at a very low layer height, like 35 or less microns. Smooth surfaces is great for big characters and big parts like heads, arms, torsos, legs, things like that. And that is majorly what I work on. So for me, I use smooth surfaces. I actually will use 2 pixels and 30% just as it is on default. I do not use high definition anti-aliasing because it has glitched off on some of my files. And I do not anti-alias on support. That is pretty much the rough export settings that you should use. Now, depending on your printer, this file slice format is always going to change. You can either save the file to your computer directly into a drive, or you can save it directly to a USB stick. Now, if your printer offers Wi-Fi or anything like that, I don't think you have the ability to do that directly in Lychee Slicer at this point. In fact, I don't think any of them have the ability to do that. I think you need to use the native slicer for that, for whatever printer you have. But again, it's not really that big of a deal. If you have the ability to transport the file over Wi-Fi, just take the file from your computer and transport it that way. I know a lot of folks that use a bunch of different styles of printers, and that's how they work. So anyway, that should be about it for supporting a file, and I will leave you guys with the slice as we exit out for this video. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I hope this was educational, and I hope you learned something. We're going to have a lot more videos like this in the months to come. Don't forget, we've got Halloween coming up, so hope everybody stays safe and gets lots of candy, trick or treat, and all that. Then we got our wonderful holidays coming up like Christmas and all that, and New Year. So we're all looking forward to it. Everybody be safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.